Welcome to A Voice and Beyond. We have Russ Walsh. We welcome you to the show, Russ. I'm so excited to be speaking with you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Marissa.
Oh, look, this was a no-brainer because some of the information that you have to share with us in this particular interview is so important, and some people probably turned a blind eye to some of what you're going to share, or that they feel, oh, this doesn't impact me or our lifetime, but it truly is so incredibly important. And
hmm
Russ, your bio is absolutely incredible. You've worked with massive companies and you're an international speaker and climate and technology advisor and quite a pioneer. Most recently, you've launched the SeaNet, which
hmm
is a visionary systems level solution to rising sea levels, and authored
hmm
your new book on this topic, The SeaNet Vision: Stop Rising Seas and Turn Melting Ice into Blue Gold. So, as I said, this is an extremely important conversation, and just kind of capturing
hmm
in a few words, what do you hope the listener will take away from today's conversation?
Well, if they're somewhat of a skeptic about, I'll call it climate adjustment because the climate change is getting a little bit too controversial. If you're a skeptic that that's happening, that's fine. I think at the end of this conversation, we may pull you a little bit closer. I was in that category 5 years ago before I started down this path. But what's amazing though is, this is real. It's happening. There's almost 400,000 miles of coastline around the globe that are being impacted. And as I spoke with you recently, there's this past weekend in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live, they shut down the major freeway due to sea level rise. They call it a king tide. It happens sometimes maybe once or twice a year, but it'll be like 2 or 3 days in a row when that moon is at that peak. And they had to shut down freeways because the ocean was coming in. And it's never been that bad before. So it's really waking up a lot of people that we can't ignore this too much longer. Something's happening. And I'm especially excited to talk to you in Australia because your major hubs are coastal cities, right? So
Yes.
the coast is a big factor there. And what's also exciting is we really have the opportunity to leverage Australia potentially as a real key hub to what we can do on sea level rise. But the thing I'm really excited about is, and especially as I talk to young people in America, some of them are terrified by the future and they think climate's just going to be a disaster. What are they going to have to hope for? And as we talk with them, say, what if this could actually turn out to be a gift? What if some of the climate change things could be the hope for your generation? Create jobs, create opportunities, create things that were unimaginable before. Because suddenly we've got this huge supply of water coming at us, and I think Australia wouldn't mind having a little more water, even if it starts out as salt water. But the world's getting very good at desalinization. Saudi Arabia has no fresh water source. They know how to do it, and so taking that concept and just imagining 100 years from now, Australia, parts of it looking like the Amazon from the air, right? Massive
Yes.
amounts of fresh water, millions, if not tens of millions of new people living there, building these communities that really would save the planet, by redirecting the oceans. Kind of, we call it the Suez Canal on steroids. When they built the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, technically it lowered the global sea level a little bit, a fraction of an inch. So the concept works, but we've got to do it in a much bigger scale. And we got to get going soon because, like I said, this past weekend in San Francisco, it was real. I mean, people had to change their plans, people going to weddings and being in weddings, and all of a sudden you're going to be an hour late because the main freeway shut down. So it's starting to become a real aspect to the life we live all around the planet.
Yes. And strangely enough, you said that, oh, okay, in Australia, we're surrounded by coastline. Well, if I look to my right, I can see the Pacific Ocean. I actually live about 250 meters
Oh
away
man.
from the Pacific Ocean.
Okay,
And
nice.
we had a cyclone here
Mm,
about 10 months ago, and it
okay.
totally wrecked our beaches.
Wow.
Most of
Wow.
our beaches were washed away.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
and we do have king tides here,
Yeah.
and they do impact the landscape here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Russ, before we get too much deeper into this topic, because I
Hmm.
can hear the passion in your
Hmm.
voice, I want to understand you and your
Hmm.
shift in trajectory because you
Okay.
spent decades working with the world's biggest tech companies.
Hmm.
But what was happening internally for you during those years? What was the moment when you thought, I'm solving all these problems, but there's something greater that really matters?
I mean, I've always tried to look for, making an impact wherever you can, right? Make your life matter, make the things you do important. I mean, I can't say that I was instrumental to Google's success, but I was in the Google building when they had 300 employees in about 2001, 2002. And, I've seen them grow to what they've become, this monster of a company now. Facebook, I helped take them through the IPO, and through my consulting and other roles. Yeah, I remember when I moved to Silicon Valley 25 years ago, I'd only been in a corporate headquarters of one company in my life at that point. And I remember thinking it would be really cool when I retire if I could say I've been in at least 100. And I think one time I counted, it was pushing 150 or more that I've been inside of. Almost any tech company you can name: Yahoo, Apple, Facebook, Google, Twitter. So it's been interesting. And being around all those extremely innovative people has been especially amazing. I've been, I mean, in the same room with Mark Zuckerberg. I've been in the same room with Steve Jobs before, and seeing how those guys think. But
Wow.
what's really was kind of a breakthrough opportunity for me was to get a job to work at GE, General Electric, right? About 8 or 9 years ago. I remember a friend of mine had taken a role over there, and I'm like, GE, what are you guys doing over there? And he goes, oh, we're building like a whole software business, expanding it to Silicon Valley. And he was running a big part of that. He's like, I'd love for you to come be a part. So for a year, I was a consultant there, and then I went full time. And it was interesting because, you're dealing with a company that invented the light bulb, had been around 125 years, and to see them really trying to do some innovative things was very impressive to me. And the good thing about them is I got a chance to touch industries I'd never been around before. I mean, I'm on calls with Delta Airlines and Emirates airline executives about, our software and, how secure it was. It's not going to allow their planes to crash into the ocean and stuff, right? And that type of thing. But when COVID hit, our aerospace business was tanking quickly, right? People stopped
Yes.
flying. And
Yes.
GE makes a huge part of the world's percentage of the world's jet engines. And we have people at every airport ready to service engines when they land. They've got to check them before they allow them to go back. And when nobody's flying, well, guess what? Those employees, they're just a cost, right, that aren't producing any results or revenue. And so they were really hurting. And so, I rolled up my sleeves and said, hey, I've got a little more time on my hands with COVID. Let's see what we can do to make a difference with an $80 billion company. And we started out looking at how to reprovision the airspace, the airplanes and so forth, to fight wildfires, because wildfires were starting to happen in places that had never had it before, probably due to the climate. That's what a lot of people believe. And I'm not going to really go down that path right now, but I think so. But when Ireland's getting on fire and Scotland's having fires, and stuff like never before, like, okay, we got a market here. Let's shift gears and see what we can do to help a new global problem. And we've got the resources to do it. But stumbled across sea level rise. If you asked me 5 years ago, I was in that camp of sea level rise. Okay, if the sea's going up an inch a century, we got a lot of time to deal with it. This is not a problem. But the reality is it's going up faster than an inch a decade now. And in some places, the land is sinking. It's kind of like if you build a sandcastle on the beach. Unless you build it out of bricks, if you build it with sand, right, and that first wave hits it, that thing's going to collapse a bit. And that's what's happening as the seas are pushing in. In a lot of areas, the sea is sinking quite a bit. And Jakarta, Indonesia is having a real humanitarian problem. Bangladesh, a terrible situation. And like I said, there's coastal places here in the Bay Area this weekend. It was shut down as well, just at least for a few hours because of the king tides. But it's still very real that these things are happening. And what shocked me the most was as I started binge reading and watching everything I could get my hands on about sea level rise, nobody had an answer. Every documentary ended like doomsday. At some point we can't build any more seawalls and levees. because the sea, they're saying it's not like the sea would just go up a foot or two in the worst case. That would be nice if that was the case. But we're talking it could go up over 200 feet. So, a third of the world's population would be displaced because most people live within that elevation. You live within that elevation more than
Yes.
likely, unless you're on a big hillside there where you're located, right? So this affects, I mean, there will be entire nations that in 30 to 40 years might not exist. Island nations like the Maldives, Tuvalu, quite a few others, completely at risk of just being gone, right? The
Mm.
Florida Keys, a beautiful part of America, very much at risk that, by 2070 for sure, they could easily be gone, right? And all that valuable property, all those people have all those homes and investments could be gone. And like I said, and nobody had an answer. It's just like we're going to keep fighting this the conventional way and spending trillions of tax dollars without a lot of people knowing that their money's going into all these things and stuff. But we're like, there's got to be a way. So when I was looking, I was like, well, when you build a new town or city, one of the things they've been doing for centuries is let's build some holding ponds and things like that. When it rains a lot or something, we got someplace for the water to go so it doesn't flood the town, doesn't flood homes, doesn't flood whatever, right? And stuff. What if we could take that concept and move it forward? And so I ran some numbers with some mathematicians I know to say, could we do this, right? Could we fight a 2 foot of sea level rise? Could we win against 20 feet? Could we even have enough land to displace the full worst case 200 and something feet? And we came up with the answer, we could. We're going to have to get really innovative, but we could do this. And mankind's done some pretty incredible things. So knowing that,
Yes.
okay, we could do this, and then I got introduced to some top leaders in climate, construction. And when they said, hey, Russ, this is brilliant. This could change it all. Nobody's thought of this. I don't know why, but this is what we're going to have to do. There's no doubt. And it is feasible. So now we're at that point of like, I was in communication last night with the guy at NASA who's heading up the global strategy for sea level rise. I was in touch recently with the person in the Netherlands who's one of the leaders on what they're doing about it. I've been in touch with the people in Venice, Italy. And one of the companies I'm working with, they have a big presence in Australia with some of the people, the engineers they have there too, and they're excited about what this could mean. But we got to get going on this. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of happening. And what inspired me really to step forward was that nobody was driving a plan, a solution. So it's like somebody better step in and do something and make this happen. And like if I get to a point where some major people who have the influence take hold of this and run with it, I'm willing to step back and all right, good. We got the evangelism out there, and now some people who can make this happen are running with it. If they want me to be involved, great. If not, but the key thing right now is we still don't have that. And if you've heard of the World Economic Forum, which is coming up in Davos in less than 2 weeks from now, I don't think this is a talking point. And it's they're talking about climate. Probably one of the biggest talking points is climate and greenhouse gas emissions and all that. But they've already come to the
Mm.
conclusion that if they stopped all the greenhouse gases, there's no way they're going to stop the ice melt anytime soon, right? It's like the wheels are in motion, right? It's a 70-degree day, and the snow on the ground is not going to last too long. And even if we cool it back to 50, right, it's still going to be melting unless we can really get a lot of new snow coming down quickly. So that's kind of what's going on with this is when I really saw that the world's kind of desperate for a solution. And with all the brilliant minds out there, I don't consider myself in that elite category of these brilliant people, but it's just like, it's obvious that there's something that's got to be done. And, having a third of the world's population retreat to higher ground over the next 200 years is not acceptable.
No, it's unimaginable. And Russ, I can't believe that no one has tried to tackle this issue up until you've come along and just thought to yourself, you know what, I can do this. There's got to be a solution, and that tenacity that you must have had in trying to find that solution. And what you're proposing is something massive and it's bold, the
Yeah,
SeaNet vision.
right.
So can you tell us what it is, how it can actually stop sea level rise, and your vision with this?
Sure. Yeah. So the idea is that, and especially we really have a big target on with Australia. I mean, they would be the biggest and best candidate from a high level view, right? I mean,
Mhm.
to get going with this and break ground to do anything to, displace one bucket of water, we got to do some homework that beyond what we've done so far and geological studies, all these kind of things to really make sure, that where are we going to do this and how are we going to go about it and what's going to happen. But the one good thing is, the Sahara and Australia, the two biggest obvious places, right? This massive arid space, highly uninhabited, and mostly uninhabited because you just don't have water, right? Fresh
Mhm.
water. If you had fresh water everywhere, it'd be a game changer. So that's kind of the way we're looking at this is, if we could get a determination in the next couple of years to say, okay, yeah, Australia would be a great candidate. We take Western Australia and we're going to start transforming and essentially digging these massive inland lakes and stuff. And as we've been talking about this with some of the team and the consortium I've been invited to be a part of, we're like, if you look at the kind of way we dig right now, mining companies and stuff, certainly they're trying to be as efficient as they can, but they've been able to get away with, the biggest construction equipment you generally see is about the size of a house, right? I mean, that's about it. And as we've been talking in the last few weeks, what if you could build a digging equipment the size of a cruise ship? I mean, we build cruise ships, right? We build things that
Yes.
float like that. And
Yes.
CEO of one of the companies goes, "Oh my God, Russ, 40 years ago when I was at Chevron, we were looking at building stuff to that scale, and we actually were really far along. And then we kind of ended up pulling back because some world economic situations changed." But he's like, it's already been studied out and it can be done, right? And the notion that we could dig, you had 20 or 30 of those guys, you could dig the Grand Canyon in a decade, right? So the possibilities are there. One of the challenges we face is how deep can you go to, right? Even though the Earth is 4,000 miles thick, if in theory if we go 100 miles deep, we could really put a lot of water away really quickly. But the reality is we haven't gone below about a half a mile to a mile on the planet in many situations. You run into heat, you run into a lot of things. But part of the thing when we talked about a digging, equipment the size of a cruise ship, well, if you run into underground water, that's a little bit of a puddle, right? This thing is 300 feet tall. Some water coming in might even make it a little easier to dig, right? But when you got a piece of equipment that's only 20 feet tall, water running in's a big problem, right? So they're like, wow, some of these things could really change the game. But the bottom line is we start to build these things near the ocean. And again, we probably want to think as quickly as we can on how we transition it from salt water to fresh water. We definitely don't want to cover ground with too much salt water. And as we've talked with some of the environmentalists in our network, some of them are kind of quick to say, hey, you can't do this. You can't cover all this land with salt water. And we're like, well, if we don't do it, it's going to happen anyway. Wouldn't it be a whole lot better for us to put the water where we thought is the best place to put it and protect all these ecosystems and environments for all these animals and plants and things like that are at high risk right now? Save them and maybe relocate some of them. But that would be the concept. So again, as we build this, we're certainly not going to start out by building something the size of the Grand Canyon. We'd probably start with more modest things, lakes that are a mile by a mile, and move onward. But if you've been following anything that's going on with the data centers and AI, it's crazy what's happening. There's almost $1 trillion in spend allocated right now to build just the 10 largest data center layouts. I mean, they're building stuff that's the size of, it would take up entire Sydney, Australia, right? The entire area is the size of counties, as we call them in America,
Wow.
right? Like 10-mile by 12-mile tracts of land, and for nothing but data centers and stuff. So all this is really happening, and we're transforming hundreds of square miles of land right now. That's in progress. So the notion of, hey, let's start digging down into the earth and capturing water while we're at it in some form or fashion, and introduce that to the game. So we've got a lot of interesting things going on. But the exciting thing is, what could it be 25 years from now? What if we did bring sea levels back to where they were 100 years ago? And what if by the end of the century, we took the sea level down 2 or 3 feet, right? And there's more land. When you look out there, you got to walk another 500 yards to get to the sea because, we took it down a little bit and there's a little more to work with, right? A little more protection. The next cyclone that comes through has got a little bit more buffer to
Mhm.
protect you guys too. So these are all possibilities. A lot of people don't know it, and I didn't know this when I started the research, but when the last ice age took place, the sea was 400 feet lower than it is right now. And the sea has been over 200 feet higher than it is right now during, the last full ice melt and stuff. And that's why they know. I'm from central South Carolina, and we had sand dunes in our backyard because there was a period where we were the coast. We were at 200-foot elevation, and the ocean did come in that far before. But we can't afford it as a planet now. We got too much infrastructure. We put too many roots down to allow something like that to happen. And we've got to take a little more control of the situation. So it's pretty interesting what the possibilities are.
Okay, so Russ, I want to dumb this down a little bit, and
Okay.
let me see if I've got a grip on what you're proposing.
Sure.
Is that you're proposing that we build diggers that are the size of cruise ships? And
Eventually.
yes, and that you want to build or dig and create other waterways that come off, so like rivers and lakes, and
Right.
so
So
more water
in theory, they need to
systems.
be fairly close to the ocean, right?
Yes.
Something maybe within 10 miles of the ocean, then you build canals to reach there and stuff. Because, you can't get too close to the ocean to start digging, or the water will just kind of fill, come right in, right? You have to buffer yourself. But that's the notion. Imagine 10 miles inland from, Western Australia, northwestern Australia or something, that you take a little town that already has maybe a little bit of a freshwater source and a few hundred people living there and so forth. It's like, all right, there's fresh water to survive on, and we could perhaps build reservoirs and capture more of that. So as people come in, we've got people to work with, they've got water to work with. And then as we start to build and transform these, building small lakes first, bigger lakes, then ultimately start building what we call these mega lakes. But at that point, even if you had a lake that was, say, 5 miles by 5 miles, that's about, you'd end up having a city and a town around the size of Las Vegas, Nevada, which is like 2 or 3 million people now, right? So you could transform this small area to something much more massive and what it could do. So that's the idea. Now, where do you put all that dirt, right? So the idea that you build
Where do you put that dirt?
yeah. So the idea that we're talking about is that you would put a lot of it, essentially build hills around the lake, right? So you start with somewhat of a flat surface, you dig down quite a bit, and all that earth, you kind of build man-made hills. So, which would be great for the people who live there, because who doesn't want to live in the south of France, right? Where, hey, I can look out one side, I see the Indian Ocean. I look at the other side and I see this beautiful new lake, right? I'm sitting 2,000 feet on top of a man-made infrastructure. And so those are the possibilities of what we could do. And then, of course, like I said, as we build these canals and stuff like that, and these systems to just continually expand and allow more and more water to be captured. That's the overall concept.
Yes. Okay. So I did understand.
Okay.
And so to me that reeks of money. That's a lot of money. And because I know a cruise ship is at least $1 billion
Yeah,
to build.
it's not cheap.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because my daughter works on cruise ships, and she's
yeah,
actually worked on two new builds. She's on one
yeah.
right now. So I know the
Wow.
cost of the cruise ship.
Yeah, right,
And you're saying that people are spending all this money on AI, like
right,
building all this intelligence, all these
right,
hubs where they're spending money in that area.
right.
And yet this is a massive problem that could
Yeah,
potentially wipe out
yeah.
those hubs that they're building. So
In some places, if they're too close to the
yeah,
coast, yeah.
so what I'm saying is this sounds so dumb. Like, wouldn't you spend the money to protect those areas before you build them?
Well, again, I don't think they're putting these in places that are really high risk of sea level rise right now necessarily. But what we do see, and this is what we've gotten some really interesting feedback from, is about 6 weeks ago with people from Singapore, the Netherlands, and other regions of the world who were talking about their strategy over the next 40 to 80 years for sea level rise. And these budgets are like 50 to $100 billion. I mean, Singapore's looking to have to relocate the whole port, possibly move the airport. And these are not small things. And we were like, what if you didn't have to spend 70 billion? What if you were to put 10% or 20% of that into an international monetary fund thing? And then if we can calculate that, for every, let's just say, I'm going to use the term inches and feet for now. I know that, we can translate that later, but,
That's fine.
what's about the length of your arm, right? And right now we've lost about 9 inches of sea level rise in the last 125 years. 6 inches last century. We're already double the pace this century. We lost 3 inches already. So if we kept up, this would be at least 12 inches, but it's accelerating. It's going faster and faster now. But the bottom line is, what if we could say, all right, if you in Central Africa, you get so much rain, and if you would just build some reservoirs in the mountains that aren't even that inhabited and capture the equivalent of 1 inch of sea level rise, well, to the world, that's worth $100 billion, right? And stuff, right? Because that's money that Singapore didn't have to spend, Venice, Italy didn't have to spend, Brisbane's not going to have to spend, right, to protect themselves, right, and stuff. So even if you're not even a coastal city building these types of things, but you've got a lot of rainfall, and right now you're not capturing it, but right now we're all about it's a game of water. How much water, as we say sometimes, how many swimming pools do we need to build? How big do they need to be, and where are we going to put them, right? And stuff.
Yes.
So that's the idea. But if you could say, look, same with the Philippines. Gosh, we've got property there, and they've had massive cyclone after cyclone
Yeah.
this year, and 99% of that water just went straight back out to the ocean, and it took a lot of human beings with it, and a lot of property and buildings, and sadly infrastructure as well. But it's like there's a lot of areas there that are, get so much rain. And if they could have an incentive to say, hey, if we could build a dam here in some of the mountain areas and capture, in a couple of years, those things will fill up just from the rainfall. And the world will pay us $10 billion to build that, or 100, right? Because everybody wins out of this. That's part of what we're seeing. And there's actually some real interest to take that approach to where, yeah, it's a lot of money to spend, but just imagine if you did build something, say, in a part of this Philippines right now that's not that inhabited, and you suddenly build this magnificent lake, something, that's like, just name it. I'm sure there's lakes around the world we all know and stuff. Lake Tahoe is the one
Oh,
that's out.
I was going to say that. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
geographically, it's beautiful anyway.
Right. The land value would be tremendous, right? And then the jobs you created in building all that and maintaining all that too, right? Next thing you know, you got towns and cities there that didn't exist. I mean, just look at what air conditioning has done for the Middle East, right? Dubai didn't exist. Who would have wanted to build it 100 years ago? But with air conditioning, right? Even Florida in the United States was very uninhabited 100 years ago because air conditioning wasn't ready. And it's just a horrible place to live if you don't have air conditioning.
Yes.
To change the game, right? So if we can do these and build these new communities, I mean, just imagine Western Australia if it's 80% inhabitable instead of 80% uninhabitable 100 years from now. I mean, you guys have a wonderful base climate, and if there was plenty of water around and stuff, gosh, what a dream that would be. And then you build
Yes.
these new homes, new communities where you planned everything carefully, high-speed rail, and all the possibilities that would go with that. Even the notion we were talking about of more and more people living on the water. I mean, imagine in the lakes if you retired old cruise ships and turn them into condos, right? To where you got 3, 4 bedrooms and thousands of people live on this. They go to school. The kids go to school on that, right? We start changing the game and people could live on the water in a more, spectacular way. So it's pretty exciting what the possibilities are.
Yes. I love how you think you really are a visionary. Oh my gosh, living on a cruise ship. But it's true. And
Yeah.
we have a growing population here in Australia. We have a lot of migration
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
we have a shortage of housing here is
Yeah.
incredibly high.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
and yes, we have a housing crisis here in Australia.
Uh-huh.
And there's a rental shortage. People can't afford to buy their own properties
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
We have, yeah, so our housing situation is at a critical point. So
Yeah.
that's like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And you said before that you've discussed what you're proposing with world leaders, with NASA, you've been to
Uh-huh.
Stanford,
Right.
and that takes courage and conviction, and I can tell that you've got both of those. But how are your ideas being met, and why isn't this happening already?
I probably could write my next book about that. It is interesting. I would say out of the people I've spoken to, maybe 1 out of 5 people who should be like interested and really pulling me forward, like, let's talk further. 4 out of 5 are just kind of, just willing to kind of back away, like, all right, interesting idea. We'll keep an eye on it, right? and stuff. But then I get people who go, okay, hey, that's a game changer, and they've stepped in to where, I've got an advocacy group, I've got a consortium. We meet again tomorrow morning, every Friday, and the brilliant people, and they're changing the game and in the world of insurance, real estate, construction, especially things related to, sea level rise and stuff like that. Some of the geoengineering companies and so forth. So very fascinating. So getting to be a part of that and dealing with people who this is their world. This is new to me. I mean, I don't have the expertise to know the history of what went wrong when they built the Suez Canal or the some other things that are going on, but they do. But nonetheless, they're like, hey, this is something a few years ago we were all struggling. Like, what are we going to do? What are we really going to do? When you get to the point, places like Miami, Florida, you can't get a 30-year mortgage anymore because what bank is going to, mortgage that house for 30
Really?
years when they know, yeah, oh, absolutely. These are true stories.
I had no
You can't get
idea.
insurance in a lot of parts of California, flood insurance, different things like that, wildfire insurance, all that's already happening. But mortgages are getting to the point where the bank's like, hey, I don't think your business or your home's going to be viable 30 years from now. I'll give you a 15-year maybe, but I'm not confident. And so what is going to happen when it gets to where people have seawater in their house, 24 hours a day, right? They've got to sell, they got to move, and they'll be lucky if they get anything. They might even have to pay to get their house torn down and moved, right? Like
Yes.
destruction fee and stuff. So that's a real issue on the horizon. One of the videos that we have in our kind of lineup of PR promos shows from this past fall in North Carolina. Beautiful day, homes built up on stilts to protect themselves from the water. And it was just, again, it was sunny day. There wasn't even a storm. And these homes are collapsing into the ocean. There were just waves coming in from a storm that was 2,000 miles away, but it was enough to bring these beautiful homes crashing down and stuff. So this is happening. And this was not happening 20 or 30 years ago, right? Something has changed. And I've got friends who live at the coast and they're like, Russ, this is not what it used to be 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Something's going on. The water's encroaching and it's getting pretty scary.
So is that due to global warming?
Ultimately, yes. I mean, so that's what's happening is temperature rising and the ice at Greenland, the Arctic, and Antarctica as well. It's melting somewhat, and fortunately, it hasn't. I mean, 90% of the ice is in Antarctica, and again, right now the sea level's only hasn't even gone up in a whole foot. And if you think it could go up 200 feet, I mean, we're still right at the onset of this, right? It's only like what a fraction of 1% of what worst case could be, but it's starting to accelerate, and that's what's terrifying. They're saying by the end of the century it could go up 3 feet, and there could be decades, by the end of the century where it could go up more than a foot in a decade, maybe even 2 feet, right? I mean, it's just hard to imagine that last year I was okay, and all of a sudden the sea is 6 inches closer. And like I said, with subsidence and the sinking, I mean, gosh, if you look at the documentaries on what's happening, Indonesia is spending $33 billion to build a new capital city because Jakarta's being inundated so much by the water. So literally that's happening, and you can look it up. Bangladesh it's terrifying because they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of resources, and they're almost dead flat. There's just not much elevation, and there are people you can watch documentaries in the last 15 years who've lost their home more than once. They lived, somewhere, and it was not like a nice home. It was a shack, near the ocean. They fished and everything else, and the ocean took it. They went inland a bit further. It came in another couple miles, and they're saying Bangladesh could lose 10% of its usable land by the next 25 years. It's terrifying, and it's just not
Yeah.
getting attention. And we have to, I mean, we've got to look out for these people too, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it affects us all, and we've got to come up with a solution. And that's what's exciting to me is just imagine if people from Bangladesh by the end of the century have that land back and more, and then they're part of they may not be able to capture a lot of water in Bangladesh like the SeaNet due to some aspects of things, but maybe they can. What if they could take what's already done and start, digging some massive things to hold water and creating jobs for the people there too to help with this? That
Yes.
to me is the cool thing about this.
Yes. Yes. Look, I'm sure there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about the temperature rising
Yeah,
that's causing this.
right.
What is the truth about that? What is causing the rising temperatures?
Well, let me ask you something. This one kind of gets a lot of people. If this was a myth, why would the three largest militaries on the planet be taking a whole new strategy because the ice at the northern region of the planet is melting, 3 to 6 months out of the year. It didn't happen before. So the notion that you could get a warship from China to, to the US and vice versa across the polar region, it was unthinkable. But now you hear presidents and major leaders talking about this as a very real issue. Now, so how can you say this issue, which is a new threat, and then sort
Yeah.
of deny that something's happened that changed that, right? Like the ice
Yes.
melted. Because
But
at
why?
the North Pole, you don't really have land. You just have water, right?
Mm.
At the South Pole, you have Antarctica, a huge tract of land, bigger than Australia. And, over the centuries and whatever, it's built up, in some cases, miles and miles and miles of snow and ice pack. And that's kind of what's helping protect us. But at the Arctic, where it's always been maybe 40 feet of ice or whatever at the peak, and in the winter, maybe it dropped down to 20, 30 feet. Well, now it's melting completely in some places. So for anybody who's denying, just answer that question. And haven't found anybody who had a good answer to that yet, who is on the denial side. If anything, they only deny, the deniers I've spoken with are just saying, look, the sea's not going up as fast as they say it is. But I'm like, but if it's going up and it's
It's
not,
still
it's
going
one
up.
thing if you could
Yeah.
say, in the last 150 years, it hasn't really. There's been years it's up, then it's down, it's up. But it's like if you can't dispute the fact it's gone up 9 inches in the last 125 years, it's kind of like if somebody said, "Look, I got news today from the doctor. I got cancer and I'm going to die in 6 months," and somebody comes back. Hey, come on, you're not going to die for 8 months, right? It's like you're not helping me here, right? That's bad news, and you're not making it a whole lot of worse. Helping me a lot by just telling me I got two more. I was kind of hoping I had 20 to 30 more years, right? So that's kind of how it feels sometimes when they make these statements of, oh, it's not as fast, but it's like it is a big problem, and it's
Yeah.
killing people around the
Yes.
world with the concept of what is happening, and what the future holds.
Yes. People here in Australia, we are aware of what's happening. Well, I know that because I work at a university,
Uh-huh.
so we are always being educated around what's
Mhm.
going on in the world.
You're right.
And there are a great population of people here who say, well, we can't make a difference. We're just one person.
Hmm.
Okay? And they blame China. It's what's happening in China that's causing this to happen. So, what's the
Right.
point of us taking action when China is going ahead and these are the types of things that they're doing that are creating the bigger problem? And irrespective of whatever we do, there's a country over here and they're going to continue doing what they're doing and it's not going to make a difference. So one question.
Yeah.
I know people feel overwhelmed,
Right.
and there'll be a lot of people that will be overwhelmed listening to what you're saying.
I hope
Yeah.
they leave with hope though. That's
Yes.
my
Well,
thought. Yeah.
okay, the hope. Can one person make a difference?
Yes, I think so. I mean, just look at, I mean, I know this guy's gotten to be controversial in the last year or two, but look at what Elon Musk has done. About a year ago, there were some men trapped up in space, and we didn't know what we were going to do with them, right? And he's like, let me take care of it. And he gets his crew on it. And a few weeks later, he goes and sends a rocket and brings them back. I mean, to me, that's a hero. That's a planetary hero. Like, that's a story that's almost mythological. Or like, really? Somebody, you went into space and brought somebody back, and you're just a CEO of a tech company, right? And stuff. So when you think of kind of what he's done to create new technology and so forth, it's extremely exciting what the possibilities are. If you look at some of his research in housing, I mean, he's trying to come up with housing that would be extremely affordable, that you could have modular housing for, 10, 20,000 US dollars, this beautiful, nice, and it's also maybe modular to the point, hey, I want to add on 2 more bedrooms. You can just kind of add those on when I'm ready, right? We were even having discussions like, wouldn't it be cool when kids go off to college if part of what they do is they don't live in a dorm anymore. They live in a modular condo that when they're, they can sell it when they want or whatever, but it's part of their ownership and they want to take that and that's their first real home. And the way that modular housing's working now, I don't know if you've watched some of the things there, but some of these now they've got it where you can live in a building in Hong Kong, you get relocated to London, they'll take your unit and put it on a boat and bring it over and put it, in the next place, right? Like you land in London and your house is there, right? Your
Yes.
house is waiting for you.
Yes.
So the world's changing in a lot of really cool ways, and the possibilities are exciting. As you said, can one person make a difference?
Yes. Just your
I think
average
so.
person, not Musk. Just
Yeah.
just me. What could I do?
I mean, look, the amazing thing is almost everybody in the last 100 years who made a difference in some form or fashion, they invented the light bulb or whatever. They didn't come from a wealthy family. They didn't, they were generally just a regular person who just kind of worked hard and, innovative and they just put that extra time in to do something special. I mean, I'm in here doing the final edits on my book and if I had $1 billion in the bank, I'd probably be doing something different today than working, 14 hours a day doing this. But it's kind of what drives us that, hey, I got to survive. I've still got a long life to go. I got to figure out how I'm going to make it. And if I could do something that really makes a difference in the process, then great. So I think there's real hope as I talk with the young people, that's my favorite group to talk to. I'd love to talk to your students. I get invited now to speak to colleges and schools. And again, they have this depression. I mean, kids are committing suicide over this, right? They just feel so hopeless. Then you talk to them and like, what if you could be building this stuff? What if you could go get a civil engineering degree instead of a computer science degree, right? Where you're going to do something physical, right? You're going to build these bulldozers. You're going to program them to go dig these things. You're going to go watch when we open and allow the ocean to start flowing in, right? You can do these things that are much more physical than what we feel like we've been doing for the last 50 years, where it's all been virtual, right? It's the internet and everybody's just pushing buttons and you're playing with your phone. But, the one thing that's been intriguing to me too is there's been a transformation, at least in the US, to where I would say the female population is much more physically engaged than they used to be. And my daughter loves to go running almost every day. I mean, the 3 girls, they all stay in shape. They're better than I am about it, especially even at that age. Yeah, look at you. Exactly.
I've got
So the
some.
notion,
Yeah.
yeah, they wouldn't mind getting their hands dirty. They wouldn't mind putting on a hard hat and going out to a construction site and watching all this cool stuff, right? So to think differently, about civil engineering and construction engineering, mechanical engineering, and again, it just seems like for so long, everybody just wanted to do computer stuff. I got a computer engineering degree, and sometimes I wish, gosh, what if I'd gone civil or mechanical or something where I was doing more physical stuff, but it is what it is. But it's really exciting to think the possibilities. I mean, if you watch some of these documentaries from National Geographic and stuff, they're saying that fighting sea level rise is going to be the number one employer on the planet by the end of the century. That's what they were saying. And I can send you the video links to that, right? That this is what they've been saying for the last 10, 15 years, that this is real. The climate stuff is a real big business. And it's something we got to pay attention to, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose that maybe just taking in everything that you're saying, one of the things that we could do as individuals is to raise awareness and to talk about this and have this in our conversations, in our daily interactions
Right.
with people, like talking about it.
Yeah.
And if you could put up a billboard anywhere,
Yeah.
what would it read?
Give me a second to think. That's a good question. Um,
What would you
yeah.
want to say on that billboard where you had hundreds and thousands of cars driving
Yeah.
past it every single day?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of like the title of my book. I wanted my book title to say something kind of profound to where people like, it's more than just saying sea level or rise or something, right? It gives a vision and a hope a bit, right? And so that's kind of the idea of what if we can flip this whole mess on its head and turn this into a good thing? I mean, what if the melting ice turns out to be the greatest gift to the mankind of the earth since we got electricity and steel, right? The possibilities of what we can do with this extra water is really exciting and stuff. So instead of this being the doomsday, this could be boomsday. That's kind of what we're looking at. And again, we don't want to sound like a bunch of crazy capitalists where it's going to end up that 99% of people work themselves to death and 1% of people get rich, right? That's actually a
Mm.
big thing that bothers me. And I really hope, however this shakes out, that, there's some real fairness in how this is done, that people get
Yes.
quality lives and quality lifestyle. I mean, I've been around a couple of startups, companies that have gone through various acquisitions or whatever, and I've watched people who overnight went from, living a regular life to suddenly they're worth $1 billion. I mean, I met a friend, somebody who lives in Australia. You may have heard of the company Canva. I
Oh,
met
yes. I use
the
Canva.
founder and her husband at an event in the Philippines 10 years ago when they were just a 100 employee company. And last year she was on the cover of Forbes magazine. She's worth $8 billion now, right? But, I really want to see this managed in such a way that it's not, again, where just 1%
Mm.
of people rake so much of the money in
Yes.
their pocket and everybody else. I mean, just when we all probably know the story of how the Suez Canal was built, the Panama Canal, and you can guess how many people were almost enslaved to go do that work. And then a lot of people really made big money out of it while all these people didn't even come back home to their families, right?
Mm.
We can't have that. We've got to, live like civilized people and create things that and most of the Western world does, right? I mean, the life I've seen,
Mm.
I've been to Australia to visit. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful country. I felt safe, and I felt most people had a reasonable lifestyle and stuff. They weren't living destitute. But I've been in the Philippines too, and I've seen where people are living in, very nice places and let 3, 4 blocks away, people don't have running water. They're literally just, you're right on the cusp of extreme wealth
Yes.
versus, or even just reasonable Western wealth to people that are living a life that their parents lived 200 years ago, right? They're not much further above. So that's a big part to me that I really hope we change the game. And we look back on this 100 years from now, like, wow, how many people's lives and families are so much better off from this endeavor.
Yes. So I from what you're saying, you're hoping that there is some kind of equity here, that people are
Yeah,
treated fairly, that there's not
exactly.
someone taking from the poor,
Right,
taking advantage of those people, that
right.
this plays out in a way that it's not reeking of capitalism.
Exactly. Yeah, it's got to be something fair and balanced. But we know too, people will be taking risk and stuff, and there's going to be some balance of this to do. But again, like I said, fortunately, you live in a country, and so do I, where most people have a chance at living a good
Yes.
lifestyle, a reasonable
Yes.
lifestyle. I mean,
Hmm.
most of the people I went to high school with, and we weren't wealthy. I see posts of them on Facebook. They take cruises. They go to Europe, right? They do things that 100 years ago, kings and presidents couldn't afford to do, right? They couldn't imagine doing what we do today as common people, right? So that's my hope is this really expands to where some of the countries, especially like I said, Bangladesh, Indonesia, some of these places are really struggling. Just imagining at least that you feel like you're in Singapore 40 years
Mm.
from now when you're in Bangladesh instead of, what it is right now where so many people are really living a really challenging life.
Yes. Exactly. And a lot of migrants from Europe after the Second World War immigrated to Australia and to the
Hmm.
US because
Yeah,
they were chasing the dream and the dream of a good life for themselves and their children.
right.
Russ, you're very tenacious. You're very entrepreneurial. You're an innovator. But what has surprised you most about yourself through this process? What have you learnt about yourself?
I think to me, life has a faith element. I don't think we exist here by chance. I don't think random things, molecules colliding, bring people together, creatures who have dreams, male and female of 100,000 species. There's something that put us here, and I really think that's a big part of it. And my experience has been that there is, the creator is real. He's out there and he just like, I've got kids. They're very important to me. And I think God looks after us. And one thing, for me going through this journey this past year where I close to retirement, but still, it was a financial impact. But just kind of relax and enjoy the ride, see where God's leading on this and let him make things happen. And he will. And that's what I've seen. I've gotten through some difficult valleys in my life and I came out the other side like I'm better off than I was. How did that happen? I don't know. Right?
Yes.
It's such a dark place at one point, but I just kept going and just stayed faithful. And all of a sudden on the other side, like, wow, I got more money in the bank than it doesn't even add up, right? I mean, not like I'm wealthy, but still like, how did I
Yes.
get through that season of life and stuff? So that's part of it is that faith element. I mean, I don't know if you can see behind me, but I wrote another book a few years ago called Eternity. And, that's kind of like what happens when you die, because that's another issue we're all going to have to face. The death rate's still 100%. So put a lot of time and research into that one too. So I figure if you're going to write a book, might as well write about something that's pretty significant.
Absolutely. And what have you had to sacrifice to do the work to follow through on your mission here?
If the book does okay, then we could change things. If I go back to, later this year, a regular job and stuff, I might end up having to work 2 or 3 more years before I can retire than I was planning on. So there's that. And again, you never know what your health is going to be. None of us know if we got tomorrow. I mean, I had an incident last year. I spoke at an event on a Sunday morning, and less than 24 hours later, I'm in an ER room with something going on in my digestive system, and they're telling my wife, symptoms like this, there's about a 10% chance he's not coming out of here alive, right? I'm having to give her the password to things that, and all of like, writing all this stuff down. And
Wow.
like, if I don't walk out of here in the next 2 days, you have
You're
that. So
well,
you
you're
never
here.
know.
You
Yeah.
got through it.
I did, yeah. And it turned out it was something, just a clog, it wasn't like a rupture or anything that would have been really, really problematic. And it was like something you ate kind of got clogged. And once we kind of gave you some medicine and unclogged you, you were fine. In fact, 2 days later, I was on a plane to Europe for our vacation and stuff. So you just never know. And you just can't worry too much about the bumps in the road. And just say sometimes that broken down car that, is frustrating you today, you might end up meeting somebody at the repair shop who becomes a friend for life. I mean, I met my
Absolutely.
wife in the LA airport, 10 years ago. So you never know what lies around the corner. And even that, I wasn't supposed to go through LA. I kind of got redirected. I'm like, I don't want to have to take a connection. And, I never would have met her otherwise, right? So sometimes we just got to look at life and, yeah,
It was
something
meant to
interesting could
be.
come out of this, right?
Yes. So, what have you learnt about humanity doing this work? I mean, do people care about the planet? Do
Yeah,
we
they do.
care
They
about
do.
life? Do we care about one another? Do we care about the future? What have you learnt?
One thing that strikes me, and this is probably why, we're actually talking about in the next few weeks trying to get Bill Gates or somebody that engaged, right? The world goes crazy over celebrities. If a
Oh,
celebrity they like endorses something, right? All of a sudden it's a totally different game. If I said, "Oh, by the way, Marissa, I want to be back on a call next week, but could Bill Gates join me?" And you promote that, your audience, who knows, right? Or,
can
it's
we do
interesting.
that?
Jane Fonda's become a big climate advocate. And I was also like, I got a friend who knows her. I'm like, hey, get her engaged to where, she could step away and say her last book on this was terrifying because she was in the doomsday club. Like, Jane, guess what? We could flip this. Would you like to be a part of that, right? So to me, what I'm seeing is you can go out there and have a great story, but if people don't know you well enough and you don't have enough references and track record yet, people will sit back. Even if you've got, look, hey, there's a fire coming over the hill at you. If you're a fireman, they probably will believe you a little more than the homeless guy walks out of the woods or something.
Yeah, with his
Anyway,
coat on fire, they
exactly.
still don't
So,
believe him.
yeah, so that's the thing I'm finding is, every time I meet somebody else who's an advocate that raises the bar, it just makes it that much easier. But still, you find even with some of them, they get no responses from people sometimes that they're kind of shocked. Like, really? I thought I knew that guy. We worked together years ago, and he's not even returning my phone calls and emails. It's a little surprising. Human nature is strange, and in a lot of ways, good ways and bad. But the good thing almost everybody cares about what's going on to a certain degree. That's the one thing, especially young people. They see this as their planet and they really want to make a difference. And they're excited when there's an opportunity that, hey, this could change it. This could be a good thing. And there could be a lot of great opportunities for us.
Yes, because though that generation that's coming through, they've been educated. It's like politics and being politically correct around so many things these
Right.
days.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they're the ones that are being educated. It's the baby boomers and some of those, maybe the generation before, and the one, I don't know if there's one after. I think that's it. Is that the
Yeah.
last?
I've lost
Yeah,
track too.
I've
Yeah.
lost track.
I think
But
I'm a baby boomer or something
yeah, well,
category.
I'm a boomer too,
Yeah.
proudly, proudly a boomer. You had a big career shift. You went from Silicon Valley, working with all these companies, all these
Yeah.
multinationals.
Yeah.
And was there ever a point that you cared what people thought about you? Because now the reason I ask this is because there is an audience of people that listen to my podcast who
Uh-huh.
are from the creative industries,
Right.
and they often get stuck in making that first move towards their career goal because they're frightened of failure, but also they care what people think.
We all do, right? We all do, right? Nobody wants to be unnecessarily disliked, right? But there is a point too where we have to take a stand. And that's part of the thing in American politics. I watch a little bit of news from Australia, but today we're just so divided over things that
Oh,
just
yeah.
come on. I mean, it's really frustrating. And I don't think that's the norm. It's the people at the fringes, but they're getting all the attention, right? And stuff. So that's what I'm hoping will change too, that we've got to get to a point. I mean, just like the Palestinians and Israelis, right? It's like, guys, we got to break this thing. We can't just, you guys have been friends at times in the past. And today, whatever it is that you're indoctrinating yourself to think, I can't accept these other people, we got to change that. And that's part of what I'm hoping too, is that we start to flip this and say, guys, we agree on a lot of things. Let's quit worrying about the things that we don't. We'll figure those out. But that's a big problem, that we're seeing right now, just the dividedness going on among the cultures and stuff right now. And the reality is most of us agree on 80 to 90% of the issues, right?
Exactly. We're going to bring this back to the voice, and I have a
Uh-huh.
tricky way of
Sure.
doing this. So, even
Okay.
though we're talking about rising sea levels, and I think of the voice as a metaphor for life, people
Yep.
speaking up about whatever it is that for you, it's talking about rising sea levels. Have you ever felt silenced or unheard or invisible through the process of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. There's been some times I've had phone calls, I've had communications, and just didn't pan out. And it's just I just keep building a list. I got almost 10,000 connections on LinkedIn, and it's just like, all right, if that person doesn't follow up, there's somebody else, right? I just can't get bogged down and worrying too much about that. And sometimes people just are unusually busy, so then they come around a month later, like, hey, sorry I didn't get back to you, but hey, what's going on? Let me, let's catch up, right? So you have to have that patience too, that sometimes when somebody's not responding, you just never know what they're going through and what they're dealing with. So just try to accept, move on. But, you ask that question of how does somebody get started, in the creative side and stuff. The thing I put in the dedication to my book is there's a quote from Maya Angelou, I'm
I
probably not
love.
pronouncing the name,
Yes.
about you may not remember everything someone said, but you always remember how they made you feel. And I really want my book to make people feel like, hey, this was written by somebody who cares about me, the planet, my kids and grandkids, right? And stuff. They won't remember everything I wrote in the book. I don't even remember some of the things I wrote in the book already. But that feeling that this was a person that really cares, and I could reach out to them and they're real and they would try to help me if they could and stuff. That's kind of what I want to leave people with. And then you pass that on, right? But for the people, the creative people who have ideas and don't know where to go with it, just like I did, start a Google sheet and start making a list of things, right? And then you prioritize. You add a few columns of what do I really want to sort out and focus. I mean, my daughter and I were going through that last night. I got 100 items and about 40 of them have been closed and there's a whole bunch of others. But what are the priorities? What's next, right? What do we have to do this week and next week to get to the goal? And like I said, my book's coming out in a couple of weeks. So, I had to really stay focused. And my publisher's waiting for some stuff from me tomorrow. So, and I'm pretty close to finishing it. But it's fun. But you got to know sometimes too, I got to stop doing some things for a week or so and focus on this, get that done. Then I can go catch my breath and enjoy and celebrate.
Well, you actually gave 3 really great pieces of advice there.
Okay.
One is the focus, and a lot of creatives get distracted very easily by the next shiny object. Oh,
Yeah.
that looks like fun over there. I think I'll go and do that instead.
Yeah.
And the other thing was prioritizing. There are all these tasks in front of you. Pick out
Yeah.
the one that is going to take you closer to the direction of the vision that you have for your life.
Right.
And having clarity around that
Yeah.
as well. Being
Yeah.
clear on what your vision is. Obviously,
Yeah.
yours is very clear. I have a
Yeah.
very clear vision for my life. So you have to be able to be clear on that, prioritize the steps towards it, and stay focused. Great advice.
Yeah. Thanks.
Love that. Now, in finishing up, is there anything else you'd like to add to this interview?
I don't think so. Marissa, you've made it a lot of fun, and I can tell why your audience likes you. You make this feel very real. You're not just transactional next. And I've done a few interviews in the last few months where somebody was, all right, no response to what I just said. They're on to the next question. It's canned and it's just, it works for them, but it's different. But with you, like I said, I really enjoy. I could sit here and talk to you for 4 more hours. My wife would love to sit and chat with you too. You
I
and
would
her
love
think
that.
alike. Yeah, like I said, she's more the creative type and stuff too, to where and she's was in training and leadership development at Prudential Life Insurance. She had led that for the entire Philippines for many years and retired from that a couple of years ago. But she has that creative mentality of, let me create a program, right? I'm going to build these new PowerPoints and training decks, and it's just like writing music, right? Where you really have to.
I love creating PowerPoint and making it look as pretty as possible.
Oh gosh, you and her would just get along great because when I do PowerPoints, usually there's a bunch of words on a page, and I'm like, all right, you decorate it. Now I've told the story, I did it. Now you make it where somebody
Oh,
would
I
actually
would
enjoy
love that job.
it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Russ, I thank you for your time and thank you for the beautiful feedback. That's really
Oh, sure.
appreciated
Oh,
too.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to share the links to your book
Okay.
and to your website,
Okay.
which I
Thank you.
visited, and it's
Yeah.
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And to
Well,
any
it's still coming
video.
along. I thought they were supposed to put something saying it's under construction, and somehow that's been kind of up and down lately. We're not quite done. We're about to, and of course, the book's coming out hopefully in about 3 weeks, maybe even sooner. So the Amazon, you should be able to look it up. Again, CNET
Great.
Vision. Hopefully, it'll come up as the first thing you see when you search.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And I
You
wish
bet.
you all the very best. And I wish our planet all the very
Yeah.
best too.
Thank you. Yeah. And if I'd love to talk to your students someday too. So if you
Okay.
want me to join a class, I do that quite often remotely and see what their questions are and see what their thoughts are. Who knows? Some of them may be helping to build the CNET in Australia in a few more years.
I know some people that would be very interested. So
Absolutely.
thank you for your time, Russ.
Right. Take
Best
care.
wishes. Okay.
You bet.
Bye.
See you. Thanks, Marissa. Bye-bye.